Hey guys, how are we doing? So, something a little bit different. I haven't reacted to one of Geekdom's videos for a while. This is the truth about Dragon Ball Z Kai. Now, I never watched Kai. It's always intrigued me. Never got into it because I'm just like, no, I like Z as it is. I like the long drawn out moments and that, but I get told that it's like trimmed down and that, and I've never understood like why it is what it is. So, hopefully Geekdom 101 is going to explain in this video, and I'll be more aware. And if you guys are intrigued, here we are. And then next week, I promised someone that I would watch the truth about Dragon Ball GT, which I think would be interesting as well. I absolutely hate GT. But until then, let's watch the truth about Dragon Ball Z Kai. Oh, hello.
2008's Jump Super Anime Tour gave us the OVA known as Yo Son Goku and His Friends Return.
Right, yeah.
And while it wasn't really much in the way of story, it was a reunion of the original cast and original score in a new adventure with new animation, purely done to make the fans happy
and they loved
and to remember the glory days of Dragon Ball. And on the previous edition of Dragon Ball In Depth, I went into detail about the story of the creation of this special. And the popularity of the OVA among the hardcore fandom proved that there was interest in new Dragon Ball material and that some sort of a revival of the series could work.
I like
However,
Resurrection.
In 2009, instead of looking to the future, Japan had to look to the past to capitalize on the new generation of fans that were just being introduced to Dragon Ball, as well as bring people something nostalgic and different that they maybe hadn't experienced
before. So try and cater to both audiences.
When DragonAll Kai became a thing.
Right.
Now, if your only exposure to Kai
what is that?
the censored Toonzai version with the blue Mr. Popo, you've not seen the right version.
I don't even know what that is.
You probably don't know half the story, but that's why I'm here.
Oh, is he blue? Well, okay, right.
Dragon Ball In Depth,
weird edits.
We're going to get into the history of Dragon Ball Kai.
Cool.
What it was, what it meant to the Dragon Ball franchise, why it exists.
Cool.
And we're going to delve into some secrets that many people may not know. So no matter what your opinion of Dragon Ball Kai is, whether you've seen a little bit of it, all of it, or none of it, I assure you that this edition of Dragon Ball In Depth will tell you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Cool.
Let's get to it next.
Awesome. Cool. Cool. Part 1. The origin of Kai.
Now, logic would tell you that with the success of the 2008 OVA, it proved that Dragon Ball fans wanted new Dragon Ball stories. It proved that enough time had passed since the end of Dragon Ball GT to where the franchise fatigue had begun to wear off, which I outlined in my Truth About GT video.
Right, I need to watch that.
In an interview with Toriyama's original mentor and editor, Kazuhiko Torishima, he reveals that in the late 2000s, Bandai of Japan was having trouble pushing Dragon Ball merchandise because it had been so long since Dragon Ball was a thing. And as a result of that, Toriyama, Fuji TV, and Toei were approached about doing a new Dragon Ball series to not only revitalize the franchise, but to present Dragon Ball to a brand new generation of fans.
Right,
and obviously, the other companies involved with making Dragon Ball, Fuji TV, Shueisha, Toei, they all want the same thing, and that's money. But unlike what happened with GT, this time they wanted to proceed with Toriyama being at least more involved than he was in GT. But unfortunately, when it was pitched to Toriyama, he was not interested. So what would end up becoming Dragon Ball Super in 2015 was being discussed with Toriyama even 6-7 years before the project actually materialized.
Wow.
Toriyama would come back to help write the Yo Son Goku OVA, but commitment to a new Dragon Ball series is not something he was interested in at the time. Fuji TV, which is the TV station that broadcast Dragon Ball for many, many years, and Toei of Japan were in desperate need of a new TV show that would be a hit, could fill the Sunday morning time slot in Japan, as well as celebrate the 20-year anniversary of Dragon Ball Z. Because April of 2009, when Kai debuted, was the 20-year anniversary of when Dragon Ball Z began in 1989.
It's a way to celebrate it.
So, with Toriyama not really being on
board with
a new series at the time, they chose not to make the series without Toriyama, and instead of going forward, they went back to the past. Now, having reruns of Dragon Ball Z in 2009 in the Sunday morning time slot with One Piece, which at the time was Toei's huge hit, wouldn't have worked out quite as well for various different reasons. The main one being that technology in 2009 compared to the early 90s was completely different.
Yep.
In the early 90s,
Jesus.
99% of people in the world did not have widescreen TVs,
Mm-mm.
and high-definition televisions were merely a pipe dream with the exception of perhaps the military. So virtually every TV show was shot in 4:3 aspect ratio, which is full screen for television. Movies were still shot in widescreen because they were shown in widescreen movie theaters. In the late 2000s, widescreen televisions and flat screens and HD TVs had become something that was getting bigger
to re-show
and bigger
them, the aspect ratio would be off, wouldn't it, completely?
All over the world.
Right,
so something had to be done about that, but
we need to do something.
That's not the only situation that they had. The original audio masters for Dragon Ball Z with the original voice recordings had been discarded years ago.
No way.
Why? Why the original broadcast audio has been so coveted by so many of the super hardcore fans, because Toei themselves disposed of the audio masters, and like I said, in the late 2000s, more expensive and more expansive home audio setups and home theater setups have become a thing. So airing Dragon Ball Z with the audio tapes that Toei had in their library just wouldn't have sounded clear and crisp with the new technology.
Why would you get rid of that?
Taking all of this into consideration, one of the biggest complaints or criticisms of Dragon Ball Z is that it's too long and has too much filler. So the idea kind of came from Toei Animation and Fuji TV.
Who said that?
Re-airing old episodes of Dragon Ball Z just wouldn't be special enough for what they had in mind, and doing a completely new animation, re-animating everything from scratch, would probably be a bit too costly at the time for what they were trying to do for a story that's so long and had already been told. So the idea for Dragon Ball Kai kind of came into fruition that Kai would be a recut of Dragon Ball Z. It would be referred to as a refreshed version to celebrate the 20th anniversary. And what they would do is they would take the original animation cells, the original animation production from the late 80s and early 90s of DBZ and update it with new technology. They would digitally remaster the original footage for high-definition televisions. But also, in addition to that, we discovered from community member Wasted Wisher in January of 2009 that Toei Animation would in fact be touching up and redrawing portions of the original animation to make it a little bit cleaner, and also because of the fact that it would be broadcast in widescreen, rather than just chop off the top and bottom for widescreen, which would be a problem, Dragon Ball Kai went through a reframing process where somebody would go in and actually set up the frames so that things weren't chopped off. So they put it a little bit higher, a little bit lower, to really give you the experience of it being a new show versus one from 20 years earlier that's just being recut. Some have called this process reformatting, but no matter what you call it, they did have access to better digital technology at the time.
So they didn't just stretch the picture.
Mentioned filler, and with this new Dragon Ball Z remastering or recut, it was referred to as the original Akira Toriyama cut, but that's not entirely true. When Kai was being promoted all over the world, even in the United States, a lot of folks referred to it as all action, no filler, and that's wrong. There is still filler from Dragon Ball Z's original run that was still in Kai. For example, the character of Gregory was not in the manga, but editing Gregory out of every frame that Kai-Osama and Goku were in would take an incredibly long amount of time and not even be worth it, considering that Gregory doesn't really impact the story too much. So things like that were left into the
makes sense because of editing.
So no, Dragon Ball Kai still has filler, but the filler has been significantly cut down. And it's not just that they cut out scenes and moved them around, but it's also that certain scenes were sped up. So the series is at a much quicker pace than Dragon Ball Z.
That's cool. I like that as well. How do we cut this? I don't know. Just make it fast. Okay.
Like the Garlic Jr. saga, the fake Namek version of the Namek saga, the Otherworld tournament, all these things were cut from the Dragon Ball Kai run.
The Otherworld tournament was awesome.
Not only adhere more to Toriyama's original manga, but also to adhere more to the fact that kids in 2009 had shorter attention
Attention
spans,
span, yeah,
so
okay,
the
that makes
action
sense
had
as
to
well.
be quicker and
I like
faster
it.
paced.
I like
now,
it.
as I mentioned earlier, when it came to the audio, Dragon Ball Kai had to be completely overhauled
Completely
from Dragon
done.
Ball Z.
Jesus.
The original cast of Dragon Ball Z would have to come back and
No
re-record
way.
everything over again for Dragon Ball
That's
Kai,
mad.
with some lines being changed and things like that. And unfortunately, you know, the entire cast could not come back because some of them had passed away, some of them had retired, but still, the majority of the original cast came back, like Masako Nozawa,
Masako's
Ryo Horikawa,
amazing.
Toshio Furukawa.
She loves it, doesn't
There
she?
would be renewed sound effects and sound mastering, and there would be a brand new score, this time produced by Kenji Yamamoto, presumably because Kikuchi had been retired for so many years.
Right.
That's what I had heard. I've never been able to confirm that, but Kenji Yamamoto was brought in to do the original score for Kai, who had been working on Dragon Ball, not just the video games, but also producing some of the songs of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z for so many years. And he was a veteran of the franchise, and he was brought in to do the score for Dragon Ball Kai.
Cool.
Now, on March 20, 2009, there was a special event called the Co-Festa World of Dragon Ball Strikes Back at the Tokyo
Hell of a title, isn't it?
Anime Fair, where we found out that Kai would have new intro and outro music.
Cool.
So instead of Hironobu Kageyama singing Chala Head
Chala,
Chala, Takayoshi
Head
Tanimoto
Chala.
was brought in to sing Dragon Soul and Yeah, Break Care Break. And
Right.
these intros and outros would be the only thing in Dragon Ball Kai that actually had brand new, from the ground up, from scratch
Still, you
animation.
needed
But if
something
you wanna
completely
get
fresh,
technical
didn't you?
and count the commercial break bumpers, the eye catches as new animation or new art, that also counts. And from my understanding,
cool.
there were a very, very small
Makes it feel
handful
more
of
fresh, doesn't it? I mean,
animated
just
scenes
something.
that were done for Kai, just a few frames to make the editing process more smoothly between frames that didn't really match up with the previous cut, the Dragon Ball Z cut. So there is some custom animation, but most fans have really had a hard time spotting it. But it's in there, but they're really
They're there,
aren't
but
any
you've got
new
to go there with
sequences or
a
anything like
microscope.
that. But there were touch-ups done to the older
Cool.
sequences. This recut of Dragon Ball Z also gave Toei a chance to go back and fix some of the mistakes they made during the original run. Most notably, the Vegeta red palette from the early episodes of Vegeta. Now, I
Planet
covered this
Alia?
in detail in a video called Vegeta's Red Hair, which was a Geekdom Quickie, where I discussed what happened. And in Kai, they actually fixed that and gave Vegeta the correct color palette and the way that he's supposed to look.
That's cool.
Versus the mistake they made in the early Z episodes. But strangely enough, Nappa still doesn't quite look the way that he should. I don't know
There's
if
a
they
Funko
ran
Pop
out
of that out there
time
somewhere.
or what happened here, but nonetheless, that's one major change. The other one that gets brought up is the inconsistency of Piccolo's blood color. In Kai, they change it from red to purple just to make it more consistent. I don't believe that was actually a censorship issue. You know what? Let's talk about censorship.
Okay. Same story, different era.
One of the biggest things that I read on the internet and have read for many years about Kai is people saying they hate Kai because they feel it's a homogenized version of Dragon Ball Z with less violence and strange censorship choices like Mr. Popo being blue
That is
and all this
weird.
other stuff.
That is weird.
There's truth to some of that, and there's falsehoods to some of that fiction.
Okay.
If your only experience watching Kai is
What
the
is
Blue
that?
Popo, you are watching the wrong version. Much like with Dragon Ball Z, when it first aired in syndication back in the mid-90s, there was a lot of fear with Dragon Ball Kai that when it would air on television, it was too controversial for some audiences in the United States. The Blue Mr. Popo is not in the original cut of Dragon Ball Kai or in any of the home video releases or any of that. The Blue Popo and the weird edits there are exclusively to the CW Toonzai version of Kai. For some reason, CW was afraid to have Mr. Popo be black, I guess, because they felt he might resemble a minstrel character. Now, I understand where they're coming from in a sense, but at the same time, Mr. Popo was never recolored in any other version of Dragon Ball Z that ever aired, including the 1996 Ocean Dub, heavily censored version for syndication. So
Interesting.
why they would be so afraid to have Mr. Popo look the way he does is very weird.
That
but
is
Mr.
weird.
Popo himself has always been a strange figure when it came to localization. For example, in the Viz manga, they made his lips smaller. So there's always been that fear from different companies and different entities about Mr. Popo. It's not in the original version of Kai. However, one thing we have to address is with Dragon Ball Kai, because 2009 Japan and 1989 Japan were two very, very different worlds, there is a little bit more censorship in Kai than the way it was in the original run of Dragon Ball Z.
Right, like
there
what?
are moments in Dragon Ball Z that are extremely gory, in some cases even more so than the manga, that were absolutely toned down for a number of different reasons. Number one, Japanese broadcast standards had changed in 2009 compared to 89, and Dragon Ball was not the only show that was affected by this. So, for example, the scene where Piccolo kills Raditz and Goku is way less bloody in the Kai version. No matter what version you're watching, it has way less blood. And you have to also understand that Dragon Ball Z aired in prime time Wednesday nights at 7 on Fuji TV during its original run, whereas Dragon Ball Kai started on April 5th, 2009 at 9 a.m. just before One Piece as part of the Dream 9 time slot. The differences between a Wednesday night primetime time slot and a Sunday morning time slot for kids is very vast, so they had to kind of keep that in mind when they were producing Dragon Ball Kai. I mean, there's still blood, but there's definitely not as much of it. So as I said, it did premiere on April 5th, and guess what show Dragon Ball Kai replaced in that time slot? That's right, the late 2000s version of Gigigi no Kintaro is what Dragon Ball Kai replaced. So, just like how in 2018, the 2018 version of that show is what took over Dragon Ball Super's time slot. And I just find it interesting that we go full circle where we have now a new Kitaro replacing Super, whereas Kai replaced the older previous Kitaro. But anyways, my original point here is that there are different English dub edits of Kai for TV broadcast, whether it be Toonzai or Nicktoons or whatever. If you want the purest version of Kai, the most uncensored version, you got to get the home release, because that's the one where they really
or Blu-ray.
Purely do it. Speaking of which, let's
I might get them because they're all out now.
Dub and the story behind that, because there's actually a very interesting story behind the dub that I'll briefly cover in the next section.
Part 3. A new dub.
So Dragon Ball Kai began airing in Japan April of 2009, but it wouldn't just stay in Japan. Toei Animation did distribute the series out to numerous different markets all over the world, but when they did that, they renamed it Dragon Ball Z Kai for the international audience.
Makes sense, because people recognize Dragon Ball Z more.
That called it Dragon Ball Z Kai, but no, that was a Toei of Japan decision.
Makes sense.
In Japan, it will always be known as Dragon Ball Kai with no Z.
Right.
Internationally, it was Dragon Ball Z Kai.
It makes sense to me perfectly.
February 2nd, 2010, we found out that Funimation did license Dragon Ball Kai for release. Now, this was exciting for a couple of reasons. Number one, we finally got true remastered Dragon Ball Z done the right way, redone correctly, with the actual correct process on Blu-ray in high definition to watch on our new television sets.
The orange
and
boxes.
It did look really damn good. That was already exciting. And we could buy it without having to import DVDs. We could watch it subbed, or we can watch it dubbed.
That's cool, having the options.
Second most exciting thing.
That's cool.
Dragon Ball Kai received a redub. There had been so many complaints throughout the years, and it's still a discussion on the internet right now, about the original Dragon Ball Z dub that Funimation produced in the late 90s. And its, well, lack of quality to many fans.
I loved it.
Many fans have nostalgia for that dub.
Yeah.
Other fans think it's a very poorly produced dub. And you have to understand that in the late 90s when Dragon Ball Z was being dubbed, Funimation really were rookies to the whole dubbing thing. They did not know what they were doing. Producer Barry Watson made a lot of unusual decisions that have been criticized throughout the years, and it was just a different company compared to Funimation in 2010, which had become the leading dubbing and distribution company in the United States when it came to anime. So over a decade of experience and company growth has changed Funimation tremendously, and thus when the Kai dub came around, the landscape had changed so much that it was produced completely differently from Dragon Ball Z. With Dragon Ball Kai, because of his experience and his importance in the anime world, Chris Sabat took a much more hands-on role in making sure that Kai was dubbed more like the classic anime dubs of Funimation, where they stuck to the original Japanese script, they focus more on the elements of the series and on keeping the core themes and values of the series and making it as accurate to the Japanese version as possible.
That's cool, because you can unintentionally change story by dubbing differently.
Pickens, the production of Dragon Ball Kai is one that hardcore fans would be much more appreciative of, and it was treated more like a serious teen to adult anime versus the kids show that Dragon Ball Z was treated like back in the late 90s.
Right, okay,
and for the most part, the original cast of Z did come back for Kai, with a few changes, most notably Monica Rial replacing Tiffany Vollmer as Bulma, Chris Ayres replacing Linda Young as Frieza, and Colleen Klinkenbeard replacing Stephanie Nadolny as Gohan. Now, I'm not going to turn this into a Dragon Ball Z versus Dragon Ball Kai debate here, but the Dragon Ball Kai dub was handled completely different than the Z dub, and in my opinion, with much more care and with much more accuracy to the Japanese version. And to me, all the voice actors in 2010 were better than they were in 2000. And because of that, I think Kai still stands as the best way to watch Dragon Ball Z in English. But that controversy is just one small piece of the puzzle, and to me, isn't really a controversy. Let's talk about the real controversy behind Dragon Ball Kai and the strange circumstances surrounding the end of the original run of Kai.
Oh, okay. The Yamamoto plagiarism scandal. The Yamamoto plagiarism scandal. Wasn't quite the first one.
So, as I stated earlier, Kenji Yamamoto was the music composer for Dragon Ball Kai. He had been on the franchise for many years, producing not just music for the series, but also for the video games of Dragon Ball. He was no stranger to the series, but one of the things he had done throughout the years is he would essentially, for lack of a better term, take existing music, make small modifications to it, and sprinkle it out throughout his compositions. Now, for years, a lot of Dragon Ball fans already knew that he did this, but things really came to a head on March 9th, 2011, when Toei Animation posted an official statement on their page, which was somewhat shocking, but also not surprising. Now, keep in mind, there were only a few episodes left to air of the Cell Saga, but Toei made a statement where they discovered multiple suspicious musical pieces infringing on third-party rights. In other words, they realized that Yamamoto had been plagiarizing music for many years, not just for Kai, but for some of the video games, which is why some of the re-releases of the old games have new music. There was a major problem here, and after a swift investigation, Toei immediately redid the musical score for the final episodes of the Cell Saga by putting in old Kikuchi music from Dragon Ball Z, removing the Yamamoto scores. Yamamoto's name was completely removed from both Fuji TV and Toei's staff listings, and Dragon Ball Kai was even taken off of Yamamoto's Office 1-2 Inc. page. So this was a split of epic proportions. Now understand, because of YouTube's copyright system, I would love to actually show you examples of Yamamoto's plagiarism, but I can't because the music that he stole was copyrighted music, and I don't want to end up having to lose this video as a result of that.
Makes sense,
but there are other videos on YouTube that outline a lot of the music that he plagiarized. And actually show you examples of where he took these from. And I'm talking about like movie soundtracks for big films, 80s music, 70s music. Yamamoto borrowed from everything. And when Toei found out, they wasted no time. So the original Japanese broadcast of the Cell Saga changed with episodes 96 and 97 of Kai having the Kikuchi score. And this would of course be placed differently in Kai because of the fact that it was a different cut. So the music was the same from Z,
Right.
but it was placed in different parts, and that's
Okay.
one of the major criticisms
God.
of Kai, is that many fans feel like the Kikuchi score was very much misplaced, and I kind of see where they're coming
I
from.
can see where they're coming from,
It
not
fit
without
better
even
with
listening to
Z
it, like,
than
so
it
Jesus
did with
Christ.
Kai. Now, all subsequent airings of Dragon Ball Kai in Japan, all the reruns, now have the replacement score.
Oh
so the
my
only way
God.
to have seen the original score from Yamamoto is if you watched it on television, the original broadcast.
Wow.
However, with international Blu-ray releases and Japanese ones as well, the Yamamoto score was there. So as a result of that, you actually have a situation where both in the United States and Japan, you have two different versions
Oh my
of Kai's
God.
music. You can get the older, rarer Blu-rays
That's
that have
insane.
Yamamoto score,
That's
but
so
some
bad.
of the newer Blu-ray copies of the same episodes already have the
Oh
replacement
my
score. So
God.
in May of 2012, when Funimation re-released the early parts of Kai, these do have the replacement Kikuchi score, not the original that was on the first release Blu-rays. And this not only affected Kai, but it also
The
affected
games.
the video games
Yeah.
that Yamamoto had scored too. As far as what happened behind the scenes, we don't have a complete picture of what happened, but a lot of fans have speculated that Toei was afraid of getting sued by Hollywood
Yep.
film producers
Must have
and
been.
actual film companies, as well as musicians in North America, and
That's
that's
so
why they
bad.
drastically pulled the Yamamoto score. So even to this day, this was considered one of the biggest stories in the history of the franchise, and it's such a rare thing to happen in any franchise. Now, I mentioned that this happened
Jesus.
right before the end of the Cell arc, so the question is, what would be the circumstance of events that would lead to the end of Dragon Ball Kai? Let's get to it.
Alright, cool. The Legacy of Kai.
During Dragon Ball Kai's original run, there were 98 episodes produced that ended the series with the Cell arc. But why? The Buu saga was in the manga. Why wasn't that done right away? Well, there's a couple of reasons as to why Dragon Ball Kai ended when it did. And one of the big reasons that's constantly being brought up by people is that Dragon Ball Kai had low ratings. The series average rating was a 9.4 share, with the biggest episode hitting a 12.3 and the lowest being a 6.4. But like we discussed in the Truth About GT video, in Japan, television ratings and viewership is
not that
actually not as important as many people feel, and certainly not as important as it is over here in the West.
Right.
One thing that has to be remembered by everybody, which I briefly discussed in the first section of this video, is that the companies that make Dragon Ball are all intertwined together. Bandai, Fuji TV,
So
Shueisha,
merchandise
and
and
Toei,
stuff.
and they all benefit from Dragon Ball being successful. One of the main reasons as to why a series is deemed successful is merchandise
Right, there you
sales.
go, yeah.
And the problem is that when Dragon Ball Kai became a thing in Japan, the merchandise they were selling just did not move. People were not buying Dragon Ball Kai merchandise at the level that Bandai had hoped that they would, and presumably some within the company deemed it as being a mediocre failure. Now, I don't know if I would go that far, but apparently some felt it was. I've seen others blame the Yamamoto plagiarism scandal as a reason as
Quite
to why
possibly.
Kai ended, but that doesn't hold up whatsoever, and that's
No.
a huge piece of misinformation
Fair
because
enough.
the series was already scheduled to end with
Merchandise.
episode 98. Now, if you're watching the original Japanese run, episode 98 actually never aired and wound up becoming a home video exclusive in Japan.
Oh.
But this had nothing to do with Yamamoto. When episode 98 was supposed to air in Japan, there was a huge disaster, an earthquake and a tsunami that hit Japan, and there was coverage all over television of this disaster, and as a result of that, episode 98 never aired and was released on
Wow.
the Blu-ray and the DVDs as a bonus episode. And because they had a new anime
Wow.
premiering in Dragon Ball Kai's time slot, they just decided rather than push the episode back a week, to just put it on the Blu-ray. So that's how they handled that situation.
Fair enough.
Simply put, Dragon Ball Kai failed to continue the momentum that Yo Son Goku and his friends' return had done the year prior, and as a result of that, just was not the renaissance, it wasn't the revival of Dragon Ball that Toei, Bandai, and Fuji had hoped, and thus they put Dragon Ball back on the shelf for at least a little while. Was Kai ever really necessary? Probably not, but one thing that Kai certainly did accomplish is that it introduced a brand new plethora of fans
new
into
audience.
Dragon Ball that were younger and had never been able to see the original series, and it also provided a much more accurate English dub that a lot of the people who worked on from Funimation completely adore, as well as the fans. Now, you may be wondering, well, what about the Buu saga of Kai? What about the final chapters? Well, that is its own crazy, insane story that I will be covering in a future edition of Dragon Ball In Depth, because trust me, there is a lot to cover about the final chapters of Kai, but we'll save that for another day. I hope you enjoyed this look back at Dragon Ball Kai, the real story, the truth about the recut of Dragon Ball Z, and I thank you so very much for watching.
Wow. That was very informative. I really, really liked that. That thing with the music was crazy. Like, for that long, and then to have to go, oh god, take it off the air, redo all the music. Well, not redo all the music, but you know what I mean, take the old score and make it fit with the recut that we've done. My god, that is something else. I'd be panicking if I found that, like, you know, wait, so you're telling me that our stuff's got music in from other, like, Hollywood blockbuster films and stuff? Jesus Christ, fire the man. But that was cool. I feel like checking out Kai, I don't know. So next week I'm going to do the truth about Dragon Ball GT. I did promise in the comment section to someone that after doing this one I would do that. So, only makes sense. And, yeah. So, thank you guys very much for watching. What do you guys think of that? What do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe if you haven't already. Leave comments down below. Let me know what I should watch and discuss in future videos. And I'll see you guys, because all of you guys, next time.